Hey, this is Pamela Riemenschneider. I'm the retail editor for Blue Book Services, and this is the Produce Reporter Week in Review. Greg, I put myself out on a limb here about private labels before, and yet again, FMI's research is showing the strength of private labels. And the back and forth of it is that all of these produce brands are spending all this money, investing all these resources into branding, and consumers, especially right now, are turning more toward private labels.
Well, it's a very simple reason, and it has nothing to do with produce companies trying to brand their own product. It has to do with inflation. And we've talked about this a number of times. And the whole 2% month over month that the government keeps talking about, it is not the reality that consumers are feeling when it is 50 to 100% higher on a lot of things than it was 4 years ago. And that's in their mind. And when they're going to the grocery store, they need to find ways to save money, or at least not spend enormously more than they did before. And it's interesting reading the details of FMI's survey when they talk about there are many other issues that attract shoppers to private brands. But price and value are so far above anything else, it's really hard to conclude that much else is driving it. It does help retailers when they have high quality private labels that they can guarantee, and they have high, I mean, when it comes to produce, you have to have high quality, high flavor private label items because they're competing with branded items.
Right. And here's where I come in as a spokesperson on behalf of retail, just because of my anecdotal experience and because of the retailers that everyone wants to mimic and everyone wants to talk about how successful Publix is, and Wegmans and Costco and HEB. And all of those retailers have extremely strong private label programs. And I do know on here when we're talking about inflation, it said overall 90% of shoppers say they are likely to continue purchasing private brands, even if inflation or the price of groceries decrease. So they're coming in because they want to save some money. And then they discover that the private brand of the Dr. Pepper that they love so much at HEB tastes better than the regular one, and they just keep buying it. My husband thinks I'm crazy, but me and my boys all agree that Dr. B is where it's at, especially the cane sugar Dr. B. I mean, if it's marketing, I don't know, but I like the way it tastes better. And I had a lunch today of entirely HEB private brand. So I have a weird experience where the grocer in my neighborhood is one that a lot of retailers want to emulate, and they have an incredibly strong private brand, especially in produce. It is rare to see branded produce in HEB unless they are doing a specific program. I mentioned Hood River cherries, for example. They go so all in with Hood River cherries that they have an ice cream under the HEB Creamy Creations that is Hood River cherry ice cream. So it's not to say that they won't work with brands, but they do it in a very targeted manner.
Well, your local award-winning grocer is good at that. My local award-winning grocer is Hy-Vee, and they are very well known as a company that promotes produce brands, and it consistently has the top high quality produce brands in their produce department year round. I mean, as far as I've seen, they do some private label bananas, but they even have one of the big banana companies right next to it for about the same price. And you can hardly find any private label in the produce department. So,
I
and
get what
they're well known too. So it's just a different strategy.
Why would you private label bananas and then have the national brand right next to it? That's a question of merchandising strategy that maybe I'd like to delve into with somebody. You're gonna say 3 cents a pound on these bananas, but it
No,
is a
sure.
strategy I mentioned Costco in my strong branded comments, but Costco in the produce department is completely different. Costco is all about brands in the produce department. That's where you find your Driscoll strawberries and your Tanamir and Antle artisan romaine lettuce. And so there's very little in their Kirkland signature brand in the produce department. It's all in the packaged everything else. But there are, it goes back and forth, and some of these reasons that people should really take a look at this research and just kind of gauge the pulse of what consumers are thinking about how they're interacting with private brands, because most of the time consumers say that they're about the same as far as their experience with the private versus national branding. But I would wonder if we could get someone, maybe we can get Anna Marie on this and have her talk to people specifically about produce brands and branded produce. But it's so difficult because not every brand is available in every store. It's not like Tide versus Kirkland. And so that's a challenge to go after. But I think it would be really interesting to see if people who are exposed to both, what their opinions are of dealing with produce specific. But when we're talking overall private brands, there's some really interesting findings in this study.
Yeah, and we're coming up on IFPA, where produce companies are going to be pushing hard on new products within their own labels, and these are some headwinds that are not of their doing, but they're still going to have to deal with it and figure out a way to give a high quality message and still be able to deliver price and value to consumers, because that's on the forefront of consumers' minds.
Oh yeah, and speaking of that, the Fresh Produce Association of the Americas is hitting it where consumers are going to pay attention. They came out with some research from what was it, University of Arizona, I think, talking about
Arizona
how.
State,
Oh,
don't.
sorry, Arizona
We're
State.
gonna make some Arizona folks really mad if we don't get the right school.
It's like KU versus K-State, right?
Right, it only matters here.
And they're talking about how tomato prices would go up more than 50% if Florida got changes that it's asking for as far as tomato imports go. And Florida, of course, fired back almost immediately, saying that they're distracting. This study is not based in reality, and they're distracting people against what they're calling dumping of Mexican tomatoes on the American market. This is still going on. How many years have we been covering this tomato suspension agreement squabble?
Oh, as many as my quarter century in the industry, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, the gist of Florida's argument is that even with duties, all tomatoes from Mexico would not disappear from the market. It would just be, there would be slightly higher prices. So I mean, obviously both sides have a lot of points in their favor. And our writer, Richard Smalley, even tried to dig into it with a column this week, which was actually, I thought it was kind of funny. He, in addition to the sophomoric dumping and duties, which he's too mature to go South Park.
We're not.
He looked into what the WTO said when how do you even compare what dumping is. And dumping is where you have to compare the price of an item in its original market versus what it is in the current market. And basically the WTO says it's an extremely complex analytical situation to determine whether or not dumping is actually occurring, which we have not been able to do, and to determine what's going on with tomatoes in the United States. Obviously we don't pick sides. If there's any side that we would pick, it would be consumers and more high value tomatoes for consumers. But that doesn't choose one side or the other.
Right, right. So in long story short, we can't tell you what it means. So you're gonna have to read both sides and then read Richard's column, because he tried to dig into it too to give us all an understanding of the complexities, and turns out too complex for lay terms. So we're just probably gonna have to sit back and watch and see what happens with that. We are coming up on the International Fresh Produce Association's Global Produce and Floral Expo, I think is what it's called. Yes, okay. And the news releases have just started dropping. The new products have started dropping. I've got several of them that I've reviewed on my TikTok channel, and so definitely. And then today they, of course, dropped the winners for the retail awards. This is a healthy reminder, and I'm going to talk to Joe Watson about this, of the receptions that they're going to have, celebrating all of these winners. They've got floral, they've got science and technology, they've got retail. So keep an eye on that schedule. And we also have a preview of the show this year that just published this week as well. So everyone's getting ready. I mean, the buzz is happening, and I have a feeling it's going to reach a really high pitch next week. So exciting times.
It is going to be a big deal, and we will both be there and do our video on site, maybe even do a bonus video.
Yeah, maybe we'll see you then. For now, that's it for the Produce Reporter Week in Review. If you are not getting the Produce Reporter newsletter, you need to go to producebluebook.com and sign up.